Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into a truly grim, dark Gothic fable to unpack a descending journey into absolute existential paralysis. It's a story about a city called Oakhaven, a highly mysterious stranger, and what actually happens when the deepest, darkest parts of a society's psyche finally come knocking. If you've ever found yourself wondering about the philosophical limits of our modern obsession with endless productivity and the sheer crushing gravity of absolute nihilism, well, you are in for an incredibly fascinating ride today. Let's get right into it. To break this all down, we're going to use a classic Fichtean dialectic to explore how a society's obsession with order can just entirely collapse into the void. We'll start with part 1, the thesis, Oakhaven's failed productivity. Then we'll introduce the antithesis, the Jungian shadow. Next is the clash, philological transvaluation, and finally the synthesis, absolute existential paralyzation. All right, part 1, thesis, Oakhaven's failed productivity. Imagine a city, Oakhaven. It's this supposed jewel of industry where the smoke of factories constantly rises like tributes to human ingenuity. We're going to set up our active philosophical dialogue by contrasting Oakhaven's relentless drive for light with the absolute dark finality brought by a figure known as the soothsayer, or the spirit of negation. You see, Oakhaven was a place that chose to look exclusively at the brilliant light of their achievements. They wanted constant progress, complex machinery, highly visible success. But the soothsayer? He brings a gray, motionless liquid, and ultimately total darkness. It's the ultimate showdown between relentless, frantic motion and absolute, terrifying stillness. The citizens of Oakhaven absolutely prided themselves on their productivity, but the reality is it was entirely built on bearing their unpredictable, darkest fears. They conquered the wild forests. They paved right over the unpredictable earth. They established flawless laws and meticulous civic order. But that last point is the absolutely crucial one. They locked their deepest fears away in dark cellars. They didn't actually resolve their anxieties, they just suppressed them deep under the floorboards of their humming factories. Which brings us perfectly to part 2, antithesis. The Jungian shadow rises. So into this perfectly ordered city walks a stranger through the eastern gates. This stranger, the soothsayer, is the literal physical manifestation of a Jungian shadow. He's the embodiment of the spiritual exhaustion that Oakhaven thought they had locked away for good. The psychologist Carl Jung described the shadow as the unconscious aspect of our personality. Basically, all the weaknesses, desires, and instincts that we absolutely refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. For Oakhaven, their shadow was their profound, unspoken exhaustion. And one evening, that shadow literally just walked right through their front gates. Picture this guy. He looks like a figure drawn in the faded blue ink of ancient, forgotten journals. He's got a completely smooth, pale head and milky white spheres for eyes. No pupils at all, yet somehow he looks directly into the souls of the citizens. His shoulders are weighed down by heavy iron plates, his mechanical rigidity bound by grinding brass cogs that squeak with every single step. It represents a mind that has completely rejected the dynamic Nietzschean concept of becoming. Instead of continuous self-creation, he's opted for sterile mechanical repetition. He is literally the walking image of existential fatigue. He steps up to the grand fountain in the central marketplace, stands dead still, and speaks. And his voice? It sounds like dry leaves skittering on a tomb. He tells the people, whom he calls the long-tired ones, that their very life source is corrupted. A prosperous merchant in the crowd actually lifts a lantern to look at his own hands, and to his absolute horror, his fingers feel heavy, numb, completely unresponsive to his will. The tools he's carrying suddenly feel like anchors dragging him into the cobblestones. This sickness isn't physical, you see. It is deeply, profoundly spiritual. And that sets the stage for part 3, the clash, philological transvaluation of values. This is where we get a massive philosophical clash. The soothsayer redefines sovereignty through destruction, acting as a proto-Ubermensch tearing down archaic ideals. If we map out this philological transvaluation, we can see exactly how he violently inverts the archaic meanings of Oakhaven's virtues. In Nietzschean philosophy, transvaluation is about flipping the script on what society considers good or valuable. In Oakhaven, work meant strength and ingenuity, but the soothsayer reveals it as just a desperate mask. Their flawless order wasn't civic virtue, it was masking internal exhaustion. And their massive piles of gold, they didn't represent wealth anymore. Suddenly, they just felt like the heavy, paralyzing weight of lead. Through this lens, we see how the soothsayer actually accepts his internal chaos as a creative force. He uses it to totally shatter the illusions of the citizens' accomplishments. He doesn't bring an invading army, he just brings a devastating new perspective. He is a proto-Ubermensch because he establishes his sovereignty not by building some grand new empire, but by exposing the total emptiness of the existing one. He looks at their entire moral framework and proves to them that it's completely hollow. As he's speaking, he gestures with his glass jar of gray liquid toward a garden, and right before their eyes, the vibrant roses instantly turn to slate-colored ash. Then he drops this chilling Nietzschean thought. It's a statement that renders the continuous struggle of life completely meaningless. Think about it. If the peak is just a mirror of the valley, then ascending it offers absolutely no higher meaning. It's a devastating realization that strips away the very motivation for human striving in the first place. Which leads us to our grim conclusion. Part 4. Synthesis. Absolute existential paralysis. This is where Oakhaven's relentless motion completely collapses into the soothsayer's absolute stillness. It's a rapid descending descent into spiritual decay. First, their virtues are revealed as masks. Their illusions entirely shatter. Then, their complex machinery, their gold, even their own children feel like the weight of lead. This unbearable weight leads to a collective, hollow sigh, and finally, total petrification. They realize in real time that they spent their entire lifetimes burying their shadows, only for that shadow to rise up and swallow them whole. That sweet gray dust the soothsayer mentioned earlier, it's a metaphor for this exact spiritual decay. It's a realization so crushing that it actually deprives them of the energy required even for sorrow. They didn't weep. I mean, weeping requires the friction of life, right? The energy of actually caring. Instead, they just released a hollow sigh that literally blew out the candles in the marketplace, plunging their vaunted city of light into absolute, total darkness. Turning his back on the paralyzed crowd, the soothsayer looks out past the city walls toward a flat, sunless horizon where no storm brews and no sun rises. And he gives his final benediction to the void. Now, to be clear, this isn't a curse to him. In his mind, it's a blessing. It is the ultimate, peaceful acceptance of the end of all striving. The crucial point here is that when all wise wither, the world just becomes a tasteless broth. It represents the profound allure of non-existence over the friction of continuous self-creation. Life demands struggle, overcoming, pushing forward. But when the why is removed, the sheer crushing fatigue of that struggle sets in. The soothsayer's philosophy represents that incredibly dark temptation we all sometimes face to just give up, to let the machinery wind down and stop fighting. With those final, chilling words, the soothsayer simply walks out of the gates. He leaves the people of Oakhaven perfectly still in the dark marketplace, slowly turning to stone right alongside their silent machines. It is the perfect, tragic synthesis. The ultimate finality of the soothsayer completely and permanently consumes the failed productivity of Oakhaven. I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder about your own whys as we wrap up this explainer. Are we building our own Oakhaven? Are we constantly pushing away our own exhaustion and burying our shadows just to keep the machines of our lives running? It's a haunting Gothic fable for sure, but one that asks very real, very deep questions about how we choose to live and ultimately what we choose to bury. Think on that. And thanks for joining me today.